Hi everybody, welcome to Top Tip Tuesday. Today tips on air fills. Now over the year, I honestly have no idea how many air fills I've done, but a fair few as a dive master and then as an instructor using pure oxygen blending, and I have a few tips for you when you bring your empties in for a fill. Give yourself plenty of time to get your fill and give the filler as much time as possible to actually fill your cylinders. If you make them rush because you're in a hurry, you're going to get a hot fill, which means that you're going to get the full amount, but the cylinder is going to be hot. By the time the cylinder cools down, you'll actually lose anywhere up to like 50 bar. If the filler can take their time, however, they can fill it nice and slowly so that it doesn't get warm and they have that time to actually get the extra 50 bar in so that when you actually hit the water, you actually have a full cylinder. If you're diving twins, double check that your isolation valve is open. The filler only needs to plug into one of the valves, and trust me, they do not always check that that shutoff valve is open. If you leave it closed when you give it to them, you're probably only going to get one fill for the price of two, and you'll find that out when you hear that dreaded rush of gas from one cylinder to the other as they equalize after you open that isolation valve. If the gas in your cylinder is older than 6 months, it's really best that you get it refreshed. Nitrox, especially at higher pressures, can react inside of the cylinder, they can separate, and they can actually become toxic in extreme circumstances. So if you're planning a hiatus, say over the winter period or something, don't get an air fill beforehand. Leave it at 50 bar or whatever you ended the last dive on. Just a little bit of pressure on the inside of your cylinder, but not completely empty, obviously. And only ever fill it up just before your next dive so that gas isn't just sitting there reacting on the inside. If you know what pressure and content of the tank that you're bringing in is, that's actually really helpful, especially if it's nitrox, because the filler can use that enriched fill left inside of your tank to bolster what they put in, and they don't need to use as much oxygen. We have apps that we can calculate based on the pressure in the mix inside of the empty cylinder and then what you want it to be. That basically tells us to how much pure oxygen to top it up to, and then the rest with air to get the right mix. From completely empty, if you do empty it completely for whatever reason, we then of course have to use a lot more oxygen, which is more pricey than air. Don't lie to your filler. We've heard every trick in the book and every single excuse that you had no idea that your cylinder was out of test. And chances are we don't even listen to you about certain things, and we always check the cylinder and verify certain things ourselves unless we know and trust you. Then we'll still check the things, but we're going to get hurt when you lie to us. All you need to say is just what you want inside of your cylinder, and we're going to make it happen. If there's anything wrong, of course, we'll let you know. Pressures always equalize. If you have a half empty or half full, depending on your personal life views, cylinder at say 100 bar and a full cylinder next to it at 232, connecting the two to top up that empty one will just drain the full cylinder so that they're both at something like 170 bar. It depends on volumes and all of that, but you're just going to equalize it. The first time that you do, you're going to get a decent bump, but the next time, if you try and do that with a second cylinder, you're just going to get the next tank to say 130 bar, because it's always equalizing. It's not just taking the cream of the crop and putting it on top. Transferring between cylinders of the same size isn't really worth it. You do better to actually just swap over to that full cylinder. Yes, air fills cost money, and the larger the cylinder, the more it's going to cost, but it's not really paying for the air. That's not what you're paying for. That's not why it's so expensive. You're paying for the air filters, the lubricants of the compressor, the actual energy to pump it up, servicing costs of that compressor, replacement parts, insurance, certification fees, and the cost of the compressor itself. Compressors aren't cheap. Training the fillers as well, the fillers' actual time and their expertise, that's what you're paying for. The next time you think about complaining about a few quid for an air fill, feel free to buy the next air filters for your dive store. We go through them fairly quickly and they're not cheap. Take everything you do not want to lose off of your cylinder before you drop it off with us. Unless you're like staying with the cylinder. In a lot of cases nowadays with HSE and stuff, you're not allowed to stay right next to it, just in case something goes wrong. But if you're right next to it, it's usually okay, but try and take any random bits and bobs off, because it's very easy for us to take them off whilst we're filling, put them to one side, and then of course it's not unusual for us to see just random diving stuff just littered around the dive center, so we might forget to put it back, especially if we're filling up to like 30 cylinders all at the same time. So if you have something that is removable, try and remove it before you give it to us. Lift with your knees. It's an old adage, but it definitely applies here. A lot of dive centers might actually have policies not to handle cylinders beyond a certain point for you, for their staff safety obviously. So remember to lift with your knees and use as many helpers as possible, such as trolleys and steps, to make your life as easy as possible when you're moving cylinders around. And it is always better to make more than one journey instead of trying to carry as many as possible. Even though it is like evening you out, still it is going to do a number on your back and your shoulders. Strap your cylinders down and pack them in a lot better than you think in the back of your car. Cylinders are heavy and they're round and they don't have seat belts in the back, so when you turn that corner, the cylinder is going to keep going and it can make a real mess of the trim inside of your car. Strap it down and pack around it in all directions so that it cannot move at all, because that 1 inch of movement will widen with time. So pack it left, pack it right, as well as forward and backwards, so when you accelerate and brake, so it can't slide and damage your car or open the tank valve and lose that expensive fill that you've just paid for. And that's it for this week. If you have any helpful tips for other divers, let them know down in the comments below. Take this time to subscribe to the Simply Scuba channel. We make these videos every single week and show off the latest scuba diving equipment as well, that you can see both here and on our website simplyscuba.com. Thank you for watching everybody, and of course, safe diving.